And welcome to the Kings of Chaos podcast, starring Al Gord and Adam Dolgan, where we are both sick right now.
Yes, we are.
And that is why we sound like this. We have an interesting topic for you today. Al, would you like to bring us in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting when you think back, right, about dating in younger years.
That's scary, yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And although it's not about what lessons have you and I learned, I was really curious. I know you were talking about this as well. And we had a great conversation around this about dating today, especially in terms of men's approach in general, and are men interested in dating? And I hear this, I know from a lot of my female friends, where they're basically like, what the fuck is going on out there in the dating world? And taking it to a whole new level.
Well, if we're going to talk about dating, I'm going to need the notes on that one. That's I have the notes in front of me for the next one.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a different episode. So, cut.
And no, we don't need to cut. Al got caught on that one. So we had two topics today, and they're actually really close together.
Yeah.
They're both technically about men and dating, but one of them is the one we want to talk about right now, and that's about, are men able to pick up women's signals?
That's right. So we're going to hold that off for next week's taping, next episode,
yes.
with everything. Yes.
This is what happens when we write at the same time and we confuse ourselves.
Yep.
But so spotting the signals.
Yep.
You're a ladies, man. How you think you're pretty good at spotting signals from women? Or did we come up with this topic because you don't do it very well?
I think it's a combination, right? I think it's about reading the room.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's contextually. I think that's situation, environment is really, really important.
Okay. So reading the room, what? When you're at a club and she's grinding against you, you're like, no, she's not interested in me at all.
Exactly. Okay. I was like, where's my beer?
Exactly. Yeah, but I mean, it's not always easy for men to pick up signals. I remember when I was younger, I'll give you a good example.
Yeah.
I was in my mid-20s. I worked out. You work out a lot now, but when I was younger, I worked out before I gave that up, for more fun things like kids. But I used to work out 6 days a week.
Okay.
I was pretty fit, and, I'd go out to a bar, and anytime I was sitting with a group of my friends and we'd be out to, dinner at one of these bars, like a downtown bar patio or something, it was always interesting to me every time that a waitress would come over to me. She goes, "You look like one of my friends from high school." And I didn't pick up on it until I told one of my female friends. She goes, "Yeah, she's hitting on you." And it's just such a subtle way of, starting a conversation with men, but men aren't like that. So
no.
We're not trained for that.
No, men are so clueless. Think about how often a partner will get upset with the guy they're in a relationship with because they went and got, say, a haircut and got their hair dyed or changed color, and the guy's oblivious to that. Oblivious.
Well, because it's usually subtle. Like, to them, it's like you cut off 4 inches of hair. It's a lot, but when you're staring at them straight on, right, in that moment, like, you're probably looking into their eyes as you're supposed to be, not at their hair. But sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard. The funny thing is when they told you they were going to get a haircut and then you forget, then you're in big trouble.
Exactly. What's interesting, though, and in going through everything and doing some research on this, and they were talking about difference in male versus female brains.
Okay.
And there actually is a difference between the two, right? It's no different than you think about some other parts of an anatomy, right? And why, again, men are built a certain way. And I'm not talking about
saying that men are more logical, women are more emotional in how they deal with things.
It wasn't so much about that. It was more about in terms of parts of the brain and how many parts actually light up in terms of awareness and reception and awareness and things like that. Okay. And they were talking that, or in the research, this one study that was done.
So if you get her angry, it's like Vegas when you win a slot machine. It's like every light goes on.
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, exactly. And they're talking about typically in terms of that awareness, men have 4 to 6 regions in the brain that light up. Okay. Women have 14 to 16.
Oh, wow.
So whether you want to look at it's 10 more, or if you want to look like almost a magnitude of 3 times as many, that scientifically, to some extent, explains. It's a huge difference, which to some extent scientifically now, it explains why men are so clueless to a degree.
To a degree.
Because the reality is, we can all educate ourselves. You've chosen to go down the path of educating
Yeah.
yourself. I've chosen to go down the path of educating myself. That
Doesn't
doesn't
make it
mean
easy. Yeah.
no, and it doesn't mean that you and I know everything there is, and it doesn't mean you and I will not have clueless moments.
Mhm.
But it's about putting in the effort to understand and become more aware and look for those, whether it's those cues in dating, whether it's other elements in general. It's just that awareness piece. But if you go back scientifically, there's an explanation for this.
So you're already behind the eight ball, like even before you start learning, and that learning curve is going to be very, very, very steep.
So when you go back to our ancestors, and it's like the cavemen with "me like woman, woman come with me." When you think about the brain, it almost feels like the male brain has not progressed that much if we're only looking at 4 to 6 regions. I'm not justifying, I'm not making any excuses. I'm just saying it seems pretty primitive when you see how, at least in those regions, right? In those parts of the brain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking again about, trying to spot the signals and understanding that, this specifically for what, dating, attraction, just trying to understand if a woman even likes you when you're out and about.
Exactly. And one of the things is it's so interesting because and just in talking to people in general, people seem to feel the last few years coming out of the pandemic, people are not as warm and friendly as they used to be.
I think people have changed quite a bit for
Right?
sure. Yeah.
And again, that's perception. And there, I'm not saying there's not some reality to it because I think you see that sometimes too. But if you're on an elevator and someone nods or smiles or just like, "Hey, how are you doing today?"
Mhm.
That doesn't mean someone's hitting on you. Like,
Yeah.
guys, let's not get carried away with that. So it's not that let's look for every little thing and assume because someone's friendly, they're hitting on you.
Yeah.
If that was the case, just build based on where I live in my building. There's a
Yeah.
lot of seniors.
Yeah. They're all hitting on you,
If that's the case,
male
and it's
or
like
female. Yes.
exactly, and it's like, yeah, not my type.
But no, I mean, you
But
touch
there
on a
are
good
cues.
point because even if you look at like yeah, kids at different ages from COVID,
Yeah.
right? Some very young kids showing very big differences between some of the older kids and some of the social cues they pick up on,
Oh yeah.
or just even how social they are in certain like situations, and they just don't know how to act because they weren't exposed to it at the time when they should have been.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I mean that makes it more difficult. So that'll be interesting to see and follow many, many years from now. But for how we grew up,
Yeah.
right, it's still tough because even to this day, like, I can say I understand women. I do understand women to a certain degree, but I'll never fully understand women. And we will still butt heads to a certain degree.
And they will never fully understand men,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, but are men simpler than women, right? I always go back to, my brothers used to force me to watch Star Trek, the original Star Trek when I was a kid.
Okay.
And, I remember being in a class and I had a psychology teacher actually, invoke Star Trek in that class. And he said, men are more like Mr. Spock
Spock.
and women are more like Captain Kirk. And it made perfect sense to me at the time. Right. So if
Yeah.
you ever watch those episodes and you watch the two of them in any given scene, one's very calm and the other one's very animated and more emotional. I mean, those are extremes. But are those differences between the two sexes?
It seems to be even when you take a look at, and again, I'm talking generally. I'm not talking about in all situations. And I can't remember the relationship a therapist's name. It was Steven somebody. He was on one of the Lewis House's School of Greatness
Okay.
podcasts. So this is coming from him. This is not coming from me. Women, don't be mad at me.
Al's not an expert.
No,
He
no.
just talks about experts. Yes.
Exactly. He was talking about even in terms of disagreements, men often try and be very logical
Mm-hmm.
in solving the situation.
Well, men
Right,
want to
in-
solve
right,
problems.
right.
That's how they get themselves into trouble.
trouble,
Yeah.
and they want it, and they're very logical and sometimes very unemotional even about it. And all that
They
does
want to be
is
of use.
right,
Yeah.
and all that does is it tends to escalate a woman's emotions if it's something that has really upset her in the moment where she just wants to be listened to and heard, and the man's like, well, what about this approach? And that very calm, that's not the time to be doing it. But
Yeah.
it goes back to whether you want to look at, and we've talked about this before, men being fixers, or whether it's just men are clueless to, hey, that's not the time to be that way. But it goes back to genetics and the difference in physiology as well, including the brain.
It's funny how you even look at the differences in male and women, men and women when they're talking to each other in groups. But women you find would be much more social. They talk about maybe more meaningful things. I remember reading somewhere and it was someone, or was it a pod? I have no idea what it was. But anyways, it was a group of women, and I think they were all at a camping trip, and the women all went to the bathroom. They came back and they saw all the men talking in a circle, and they're far away. I'm like, we wonder what the men are talking about, because women are always like, what are men thinking? And these guys were talking about who has had the largest crap in their lives. And when the women found out, they were mortified. Like, they thought they'd be talking about them. They thought, they'd be talking about the kids or something important. And like, nah. And we're
No.
just like competing on that.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah.
Guys are so talk about sports.
Locker room talk,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all it is. Talk about sports, talk about women. Like guys, just there's sometimes lack of depth in conversations,
Yeah.
which is why I think you and I get along so well, because we tend to talk
We
about
get
everything.
along well, and but we also, both of us tend, in whatever, inner child issues we have, but we do both get along better with women to a certain degree,
Yeah.
because we like to have more in-depth
Depth conversations.
conversations.
Yeah.
So again, you can pigeonhole people, men or women, right? Are very different, but obviously there's a sliding scale on that.
Yeah.
So, but I think that's what allows us to maybe be a little more understanding, right? But I've still had those conversations with my friends. I've even had those conversations with my kids
Right.
about just nothing.
Absolutely. I'm not saying we never do that, and it's not that we're constantly either philosophical or talking
We're
some
talking
high intellectual
psychology, or
academic level. It's not all the time, but
yeah,
we enjoy talking about that. Where a lot of people are like, what the hell are you guys
yeah.
talking
It's
about? It's
like
like, yeah,
Aristotle, Socrates, yeah.
yeah. And who
Yeah.
would win an arm wrestling match?
I think Socrates was the younger one, so I'm gonna go
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is very interesting so far. You're not going to claim that you understand women very well, even though you grew up in a house with women.
Yeah. I mean, as I've gotten older, do I think I understand more and more?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Will I always understand everything? No. And I think if I came out and said, no, I understand women completely,
So hold on.
there'd be an issue with that.
Yeah, but let me stop you for a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, so you understand women more and more. So you were younger, you were idealistic.
Yeah.
You looked at love a certain way, not very practically when you were younger. And now that you've gotten older, and now that you understand women better and you understand yourself better, do they scare you a bit?
No,
Not at all.
no. I
No?
find,
Have you realized it's like an enigma wrapped in a riddle, and you just can't figure it out, and you're just like, you've resolved yourself? Like, I still love them, but I give up.
you know what though? There's something I tell people all the time. A challenge is an opportunity to grow and learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see this
You
as,
see every woman as a challenge.
I just figure
Al just said it, everyone. He sees every woman as a challenge. Sorry, go ahead.
going back to your question though, if there's things that I do find it's not so clear, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let me better understand. Let me learn. Let me understand, rather than just, well, that's just typical woman behavior. That's just typical whatever. It's like, no, let me better understand, because
Well, every person's still an individual,
absolutely,
right? And as
absolutely.
part of their own journey, let's say. But it's
No.
you base people on your experiences too, right? So
For sure.
you judge new people based on experience you've had, and you can't always judge them correctly.
No,
Yeah.
although I read people pretty well.
Yeah, I do
I'm
too.
gonna
But
brag.
at the same
I'm gonna
time,
brag
I
about
have
that.
been wrong, and I don't usually admit
Yeah.
that I'm wrong, but I have been wrong for sure,
Yeah.
and I've read people the wrong way. But you have a list here of possible signs that would help you to understand, you know, what kind of signals that women are giving off. And before we do that,
Yeah,
first, though,
yeah. And again, I go back to it's contextual, and I think that's huge. And I want to talk about different situations and how that changes it as
yeah.
well. I
Well,
think that's
but it's
huge.
funny how much this gets joked about, like how much men really don't understand women.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a great one. It was a reel that I was watching before I came in,
Okay.
and it was a woman having her car fixed, and it's just her and the auto mechanic, and he's very straight laced,
Right.
and he just starts talking to her about the car, but I guess she finds him attractive, so she's kind of laying it on really thick. So he's talking about certain things, and he's going, well, your engine's blown. And he goes, like, things get blown, she says, and like, with a smile and a wink, and he just keeps going. He's like, you don't want anything else to blow on your car, right? And he's like, well, you got a couple things that are bald on this car. She goes, well, I have something that's bald, and he's just totally ignoring her. And like, she tries like 4 times with different like analogies or euphemisms or whatever, and is like, she's like, I'm out. It's like, I've tried so hard.
Yeah.
Um, I've had times where that's happened to me too, because, and women think that I don't understand it, but there's certain situations with men too where I find men get very focused on something.
Yeah.
And I've had in the past, and friends have told me this, like their friends have come to my office, like, there's coworkers and they've had friends come to my office because they've seen pictures of me online. They want to try to hit on me in the office, but I'm working. It's like full blinders on.
Yeah.
And it's just like nothing will take me off of that. I'm working. That's just the way I see work. Work is work. Everything outside of that is outside of that. I don't want to say pleasure, but everything outside of that is outside of that. So they were just flabbergasted. Like, it was like, I tried my hardest and it just like gave me nothing. But I think there's a bunch of men like that.
Absolutely. And the flip side is there's times where people read in too much to things as well, and they're seeing it for more than's really there. Right. It's not easy. It's not as simple as someone walking around holding up like a thumb
You're
up
saying
or
the
thumb
older
down,
woman in the elevator, she's like stroking your back and.
throwing down the handkerchief or,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Did you pick it up for her? She just wants to see you bend down.
yeah, exactly.
All right.
Yeah, no.
Calls over her friends. Yeah. He works out. All right. So let's go through this list of different ways or that women will give off that they might be interested in you.
And in going through everything, because depending on, again, where site you look into and different people who report on this, it can be as small as 5 or 6 things to things like 20, 25, even like in a couple things I was reading, it was like the way women's feet are pointing when they're standing, because that indicates something.
No, but that's just common communication, though. Like if you were in a job interview, as an example, the
Yeah.
best way to know if someone's into your conversation, if they lean in the same way you're leaning in, or if their
Absolutely.
feet are pointed at you, because if their feet are pointed at the door, they want out.
Right.
Yeah, that's
But-
just basic human
so this,
body language.
but they
yeah.
talk about how that applies to dating cues as well. But okay, so talking about leaning in, which is a great example. Okay.
and mirroring the other person,
Right.
yeah, which is on the
Okay.
list. Yeah.
Right. So here's a couple things. So when you talk about leaning in, first of all, one-on-one date,
Okay.
and you're leaning in and you're bridging that gap, there's proximity.
He's trying to steal your nachos.
That's quite possible too. As long as she doesn't take the jalapenos, because that's the best part.
No, the cheese is the best part. But yes,
Um,
dude, we're different too. We're both men. I keep going.
But in that setting, that might be an inkling that there's interest because you're bridging the gap. If you're at an event, say you're at a club, the music's blaring, the only way you're going to talk to anyone is you have to lean in just to be able to hear anything.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily indicate
Well, and you're
interest.
swapping spit too, because you have to talk and yell at each other so
Right.
closely. It's like you're wiping your face after you talk to them. Yeah.
Exactly. So
This picture.
in that situation, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's interest. So again, contextually,
Or even someone touches you on the shoulder, they may be pulling you in closer so they can hear you.
yeah.
Yeah.
We talk about mirroring. It's one thing when it's being done subconsciously.
Yeah.
It's another thing where you're going out of your way,
Yeah.
right? Where, especially if as a guy you're sitting and it's like, right now your arms are crossed, I'm coming to do the same thing and you move and that's just creepy. It's like, because this is not organic. This is not two people almost connecting. This is a very intentional act.
It's funny because whenever my arms are crossed, it's because my back hurts, and I'm usually crossing because it feels more comfortable when
There
my
you
arms
go.
are crossed.
Yeah.
But it's like people have read into that. You're closed off. It's like,
Yeah,
not true.
no, exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, sometimes people will throw you off with their body language. But let's go back to this situation, okay? Forget the club for a minute. We can
Yeah.
talk about that after. You're on a date, okay?
Yep.
So let's say you're sitting at a table and, it's a first date and slowly but surely it's going well, okay? What cues do you think she's giving off to you that let you know that she's interested in you? I want to hear your take on this. Give me like 5.
So we already talked about the closeness and proximity. And there's times where it's interesting. There's times either it's been said partway through the date or even starting off, which is always interesting. You know what? Rather than sit across from me, why don't you sit beside me?
That's
Which
like
is-
later. I can't find that in the first 5 minutes. I'm talking progression of this.
Right,
But,
but
yeah.
I've actually had that even right from the get-go. No,
I have had
yeah,
that too.
Yeah, which is interesting because typically people like some personal space
No,
and
I've had
boundary.
when you're in a booth and it's just like, but you took the soft side of the booth and it's either they wanted to sit on the soft side so they're pissed off and they sit next to you, or they actually like you and want to sit next to you.
Oh no, I always take the chair and give them the soft side.
It depends. I'll always switch. It's just I want to be able to see when they come in. I want my back to the door.
That's fair too. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one. They sit next to you when you come in. And,
Yeah.
but like bump into you, touch your knee. Rub your thigh.
I was going to
It's a
say,
little forward for me, but okay.
yeah, but it's one of those things where, again, is someone, when they're talking to you, that
You did
playful
that, you'd
touch.
get arrested, but
Oh yeah,
yes.
no, with that playful touch where it's, they touch, your arms on the table, they touch your arm, touch your shoulder.
Or yeah, just like stroke your hand,
Yeah,
or just like put their hand over your hand. That's another one. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Um,
These are all physical touch ones. What are
yeah.
other ones?
In terms of body language, again, it depends on, you know, you can say smiling is key because if someone's sitting there with a
But smiling with their eyes, not just with their mouth, not the fake
exactly,
mouth smile.
exactly,
Yeah.
a genuine smile where they seem to be really appreciating the moment, or appreciating whatever you're talking about, and really, really into it. But again,
Okay.
that's a possible element,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hair flip.
Oh yeah, hair flip, neck exposure type
Oh,
thing,
neck
right?
exposure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of that. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I had,
Tugging at the ear.
yeah, yeah, licking
Getting
lips,
anxious, licking lips.
licking lips.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you know the whole idea behind makeup of like why red lipstick? It was arsenic back in the day, but why did they start using red lipstick? If you go back to blush and red lipstick, what was the point of it?
I mean now.
I was a history minor. That's the only reason I know it.
Okay. Yeah, I hated history.
Okay, so the reason for it, if you go back into like not medieval times, but like I'll take the 1600s.
Yeah,
So what happens to a woman when she's physically interested in a man?
blushes.
Blushes.
Yeah.
Okay, so blush and the lips engorged with blood.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm sure they swell.
Yeah, and they get red. So that's why. So but before a woman was even interested, they clued into this and like, oh, we can make men, feel that attraction just by using these things. And there wasn't even like using science at the time, so I'm just clued into it. And that's, why women spend so much on makeup nowadays.
That's fair.
That's to attract you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what else? So we're sitting at the table.
Yeah.
We have that. We got the hair flip, the wink.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
What about the laugh? Can you tell if it's a fake laugh or a real laugh?
I think so.
The knee slapping you. That's fantastic. Al, you're funny. Yeah. What else?
But it goes back. The laugh, like everything else, it goes back. Is it one
You
of?
can tell a genuine laugh.
It's the same way with a smile, right? Again, you go back smiling with the eyes, laughing with the eyes. That whole body language. I think that's key.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. Are there any other ones before you even touch this list? I just want to see, are there any other ones that you can really think that, have always let you know that a woman's interested in you? And are there men that are clueless to this? I think in many ways I am clueless to this, even though I can tell you what all the signs are. When it's in front of me, no.
Yeah.
Maybe I just talk too much. It's all about me.
I think, it's interesting. I would say if someone starts to open up and share more personal things, that might be a possibility as well, because someone's guarded and they want to be a bit more protective. Especially if they're not planning on seeing you again. Why are you going to be a bit more vulnerable and exposed?
Anxious behavior, though, too. Sometimes they put too much on the table too soon.
Yeah.
And that should be a red flag. But I say if they let out some information slowly, like
if it's a back and forth conversation. And again, I understand some people are more quiet, and I'm sure,
reserved.
I was going to say, I'm sure you, like me, can maybe be too much for some people.
Do you think alcohol creates a problem, though, when two people are out on a date and some people use that to help themselves loosen up a little bit? Do you think that hinders your ability to read someone properly?
Oh, I think, again, it's no different than beer goggles.
Oh, please explain beer goggles, Al. Maybe people haven't heard that term before. You just put yourself on the line
There
there.
you go. I have never been involved in terms of that. I don't subscribe to that. But beer goggles, where a guy gets so shit-faced, he will take home anybody or anything to sleep with that night. And then he wakes up the next day and is like, what the fuck have I done?
It's like when that guy wakes up with the horse in,
Exactly. So yeah, I especially like on a first date, you want to have one drink, that's fine. But again, you want to get to know someone, who they are. You want to have a clear idea. You want to have clear senses, so that you can pick up on the cues and not have everything, altered and skewed because you're not thinking rationally. And at the same time, you want them to be comfortable and genuine.
Take attraction out of it for a moment, though.
Yeah.
How do you know your date is comfortable with you? Just in general. I mean, some of these are
Yeah.
cues just to let you know that someone's interested
Yeah.
in you. But how do you know someone's actually comfortable with you?
Again, I think part of it goes back to body language. I
Yeah.
remember this is funny years ago. Tell you how I could tell when someone's not comfortable.
Yeah.
This was hilarious. I gone out with someone, and she gets to the restaurant, and she's like, and for those of you who can't see right now what I'm doing on
Yeah.
camera, she puts her
She's
hands over her
covering,
eyes,
yeah.
and she's like, "Hi," right?
Which is a little odd, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little
So
introverted for my liking, but yeah.
I did the same thing back. So I'm just trying to,
Because you thought she was being cute.
right? So I was
Yeah.
like, then she sits down. She's still super nervous. So I basically take the menu and I put the menu in front of my face and I'm like, would you like me just to talk behind the menu the whole time? Because you had no problems on the
Yeah.
phone. So you just pretend I'm not here. Needless to say, that did not ease the tension. I ended up being like an hour and a half monologue of me just talking. So things not to do.
From behind the menu.
No, I put it down, but it's a great menu.
Could she keep eye contact with you?
No,
Not at all.
not at all. No.
Okay, so she wasn't comfortable with you in the least bit, and her feet were probably towards the door or at least the bathroom. Okay, so we know what uncomfortable looks like, but what does comfortable look like?
Again, when, if someone's not looking at their phone, they're not looking at something to see the time or checking messages.
Yeah. Disinterest.
Absolutely. If the body language, and I understand, like you talk about, your arms crossed, that's more a back thing. But, if you have someone
He
who
orders the full lobster, gets the bib, and like it just like starts mowing on it.
oh yeah. But at the same time, it's, they're ordering nothing because they're looking to wrap this up as quickly as possible.
Or I find a lot of women are nervous, so that there's that too, where they won't eat because of that. So it's hard to read. Yeah,
It is. Honestly, I'm really lucky, I think, in terms of the fact that usually when I go out, women do order.
yeah. Have you ever seen a woman from across the room and you thought she was looking at you because she was interested and wanted to talk to you, and you walked over and it didn't work out the way you thought it was going to?
Nothing comes to mind, but probably. Although I do have a great story here. Okay. This one's a funny one, talking about people being interested. So years ago, I was down at a club. I was like 32, whatever at the time, right? And this female comes up to me, really cute, and she comes up and great big hug, kiss my cheek, like, "What's going on? What are you doing in town?" Town? What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. She's like, "Aren't you so and so?" I'm like, "No."
Oh, I still think she was hitting on you.
Okay, it gets better. So she walks off, takes about 3 steps, comes back. Just that moment, it's like the music dies down in the club, and she's like, "I remember you now. You were my teacher."
Oh,
just want to point out she was in her 20s, so it was like a 7-year age gap, and that was it. But I was
glad you told what the age gap was.
Yeah, so
she was in her 20s.
Yeah,
I was 50.
Yeah, right. So I was like 32. She was like 25, but I was like, "What the hell?" So
yeah. Sometimes you just, I remember faces. I don't remember names or what their title was.
Exactly. So that. It makes for a great story.
That's not as bad as me being younger and kind of a bit of a dick. And, it was a very loud bar and I was, talking about beer goggles. I was very drunk, but I do the opposite. I'm usually a very sarcastic drunk.
Right.
And a girl came up to me. She was attractive, but she was too aggressive. And I remember looking over at my friend and saying, and very loudly, right as the music stopped, "I'm not that drunk, am I?" That's not go over well.
And then you get the flip side. You talk about how, a woman's interested. I was at an event a while back, and this female came up. I was talking to some women. She comes up, "You're cute." I was like, "Okay, thank you."
Yeah.
She's like, "You're not going to respond?" I'm like, "No." That should have been a cue, right?
She was hoping that you would respond the way. Yeah. Didn't she stalk you the whole night?
Fuck yeah.
You told me the story.
Yeah. Like literally the point.
Didn't you actually have to call one of the bouncers over?
She had to be thrown out of the venue. Yeah. She had to be thrown out because
she just kept coming up and she couldn't understand why you as a man.
Yeah.
Right. And let's keep in mind, like most men, relatively aggressive. Most women would think that most men would hit on anything.
Yeah.
Isn't true.
Which isn't true.
I've heard that many times. Ladies, it is not true.
No.
Those are very undiscerning men, but I'd say the average man is relatively discerning.
Yeah.
And she kept coming at you and coming at you. And the thing is, if you were a man doing that to a woman,
oh yeah,
it charges.
Exactly.
She's doing it to you. It's playful. It's supposed to be cute.
Yeah.
So, although I think that's changing, I think in the US, there are certain states now where that kind of aggression from a woman will actually land her in jail.
Yeah, well, like I say, she was escorted out of the venue, and I did say, if you come near me one more time, I'm
Yeah.
having them call the police, and I'm gonna lay charges. Like I literally said, get the fuck out of my face. Like how many times do I have to be polite before you're
So,
ruining my evening?
so we've both established that Al is desirable, and if we go back to another episode that we just did recently and invoked limerence,
Yes.
she had a bit of an infatuation with you, and you don't have any bunnies at home, do you?
No,
No, okay.
no,
Little fatal attraction?
no.
No, okay.
I have eaten rabbit before. It's quite
Interesting.
delicious, but no,
Is that a euphemism?
no. I actually have eaten rabbit.
Okay. All right then. All right. I guess we should get into this list quickly.
I just want to know, is there, do we need to go through the whole list, or can we just cover the ones that maybe we didn't cover?
No, I'll cover the ones that we covered right now. Mirroring, we've already covered. Strong eye contact, we've already covered. Open body language, we've already covered. Licking lips, we've covered. Playing with the hair, we're good at this.
Yeah.
So leaning in, you covered.
Yeah.
You said exposing the neck. Is that going to be where you're at with the whole head tilting?
Yeah. I think it kind of goes hand in hand. It's not like you're sitting there, it's like someone's suddenly opening their blouse and everything. Although that might be a cue too.
You work out all the time. I noticed, you usually have like your shirt unbuttoned, like 6 buttons. Like, you're showing some chest yourself when you're out there. Like, why can't she?
Hey, women can do as they please, but it goes back to, in terms of showing neck. It's usually more just the way they, like you say, the
You're
head tilt or whatever.
distracting. You had a stalker, so.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah, okay. So we have that head tilting,
No.
open shirt, tight pants out. What else are you doing when you go to class? The subtle art of touch.
Yeah. Talked
Okay.
about that.
We
Yeah.
talked about some of it. Are we missing any touches? Them leaning in for a kiss and you totally missing that cue. That would be fun. She would not enjoy that.
No.
No.
No woman wants that.
But have you ever had that happen? And then all of a sudden you clue in and you get like some weird cheek kiss.
I
you
think-
get the I hate to use the word Eskimo, but that's what it
Yeah.
was called when we were kids, the Eskimo kiss of rubbing the noses.
I think sometimes it's the end of the date where it can be awkward, right?
Mhm.
Because depending on, you think it's gone well, you being the guy, maybe
Yeah.
she has a different perception. And because where it gets tricky is, well, I never end with a handshake. That's just weird.
No, but can you imagine like going in for the handshake and even there, like she's
Yeah.
bobbing and weaving you,
Exactly.
like, it's bobbing for apples. You can't get in there.
Yeah.
Um,
A hug is one thing, but if the woman feels like she sent you signals and
Yeah.
you're clueless and she's hoping maybe for, a small kiss, and you don't, is that a sign of rejection to her? And that's where it can be tricky.
Or you can say something. I'm a traditional man, right? It's usually not true. Any man says a traditional man may just not be into you.
Yeah.
Look, women can give lots of cues. I've had cues, years ago being on dates where a woman's like, hey, I just live around the corner. Maybe we can like walk down there. And I'm like, yeah. And I'd just say, sure. And then as we're walking, like I'm at the block with my cars, I'm like, okay, it's nice meeting you. Gotta go and hug her and like leave. Right? Because in that moment, I thought to myself, like, I really don't want to go.
Yeah.
And that was just my out in that moment.
Yeah.
But, it's men are just as confusing in our own way.
In our own way. I mean, and I think back to a date I was on. I had sat down. She sat in the booth. I had sat down across from her. She's like, "You're not going to join me in the booth." So I sat beside her.
Mhm.
Subtle touch, leaning in, laughing, smiling. Like, we can go down that list.
Yeah.
And the end of the night, she's like, "I had a really great time, but I only date guys who are at least 6'2". And since I'm not 6'2", she's
Yeah.
like, but I had a great time. And it's like, but either that was her legitimate cutoff regardless, or she wasn't as interested as it seemed,
Yeah.
but all the cues were there, which is really interesting.
Did you say the whole, who said anything about dating? No. Well, why could I picture you saying that to somebody? I don't know. Do I know a little bit about you? No.
A whole other
I was
topic.
going to get a lot of trouble for that.
Oh, absolutely. This episode's coming back to haunt me. But here's the thing too. We talked about context makes a difference, right? So a date one-on-one versus being in a club scene and some of the cues there.
No, loud places. I was I was on a first date with someone,
Yeah.
and sort of interrupt you. I know
No,
you
no,
have a
no,
big point there,
no, no.
but talking about loud places, I chose the wrong restaurant for a first date.
Right.
Literally sitting across from someone who I kind of already knew, but we're having a conversation, I think, and I'm picking up little things. She's picking up little things. It's dark. Can't really read lips in that way because it's so dark. It's so loud because it had a live band. It's a mistake because you're sitting there, but here's the problem. It's like there's attraction, but because you haven't actually learned anything, it's all you have to base it on is attraction. So
Yeah.
you could actually start a relationship with someone with just based on that attraction because that's all you had in that moment. So that's a false start
Yeah.
because you actually didn't learn anything about the person. You're going by body language, but you actually didn't learn anything about them, which I find is interesting. So it would be the same if you were in a club, like
Yeah.
trying to talk to somebody. They dance great.
Yeah. But then conversely, you were talking early on when we kind of led into the episode about, you'd be out and a waitress would say, oh, you look familiar.
Yeah.
But I know people who every time, and I may have talked about this before, who every time they'd go out, that waitress is hitting on me. Why is that? She's smiling. She's talking to me. Like, yeah,
That's a good tip.
that's her job. It's
Yeah.
called the
Or
hospitality
she's just
industry.
friendly in general, which there's nothing wrong with.
There's nothing wrong
right?
with.
Like
Right,
you
like-
should hope most people are friendly in general
But it goes-
when they're working.
Right, but it goes back to what we talked about earlier on, even being in an elevator or a store. You know what? In this day and age,
You should
it's
still be making eye contact and
and-
smiling at everybody.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just decency and common courtesy. It doesn't mean everyone's hitting on you and vice versa. It doesn't mean someone smiles at you. It's
What communities
she's into
used
me.
to do all the time, but they weren't
Exactly.
staring down at their phones the whole time.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's the other thing too. It's like it's so hard to read someone. They could be talking to you, but they're staring down at their phone. I've done this to people, and I don't do it on purpose. But even when I'm in business meetings, sometimes, and I only do it to people I work with. But sometimes for me to listen really well, I have to focus on something in the distance. So I'm looking way off into the distance while they're talking to me. I'm not making eye contact.
Okay.
So they just keep turning around and go, what are you looking at? And it's like, oh, sorry. It's just, I'm just looking at this. So I would be hard to read in those situations. I did that by looking at a screen at a hockey game once on a date. So I'm sure I did that too. But when people are distracted, they're hard to read too because they're not fully paying attention.
But guys tend to be more distractible.
Really?
I think so.
By what?
Anything and everything. Again, it's if we're clueless with a lot of things and the way, again, gender differences.
But if you're looking away at another woman while you're on a date with her, is that you telling her you're not interested?
I've done that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if they done it to you?
They may have.
Mm-hmm. Or they pointing out, hey, I really like those jeans on that guy. She's not talking about the jeans. Yeah.
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 Here's something that's interesting though about this list.
Mm-hmm.
And if nothing else, in terms of taking something away from this, I would say it goes back to the rule of three.
Yeah.
And so the rule of three is, again, three. Yeah.
Free?
Three. Yeah.
Free, okay.
The rule of free too. Yeah.
Rule of free, yeah.
Rule of free. Yeah. Free's always better. Or is it?
No.
Okay.
Be careful. Be careful.
Be careful what you
get
wish
paid.
for. Yeah.
Be careful what you pay for.
The rule.
The gift that keeps on giving. Yeah.
Thought we're not talking about herpes on this episode.
I have a dirty mind. Yeah.
The rule of three is that essentially when you're looking for cues that she might be interested,
Okay.
there's at least three of these elements from the list. Okay, so
You
again,
need at least three to get an accurate view.
to get a sense of, right? If all you get, well, she smiled at me. No.
Anyone could smile at you.
Exactly. Or she leaned in. Maybe it was hard to hear. But again, you get the genuine smile and the proximity and maybe the hair flip. Then maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But even there, okay, so you're not 100% sure what this is telling you.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you finish off the evening then? Right? Because again, don't make assumptions.
No.
Right? There's that old saying about assuming.
No, and it gets more and more difficult. It's, laws change, sexual harassment. More and more men are afraid to approach women, as an example too, which we're going to get into in another episode.
Yeah.
So when you have that, you don't want to read into anything. You almost would prefer, if it didn't have to be so subtle. And I think the way that we've changed as a society, these subtleties don't necessarily work the same way they used to. And people have gotten worse and worse at reading people because of technology and things like that.
Yeah. And I agree, right? I technology is a whole other issue when it comes to this. But even when you talk about body language and situational understanding, let's say you're at a club or an event where there's dancing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this before, a group of guys, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
up there dancing. Okay. Sometimes women just go out, they want to have fun, they want to dance.
Yeah, as a
Just
group together,
right?
yeah.
Just because they might let you in to dance with you
Mm.
doesn't mean that they're saying they're interested.
No, dancing is one thing.
And it definitely doesn't give you permission
Yeah. To
to
touch
be
them.
grinding or touching or everything else.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing where if you go up and you start dancing and they're okay with it, they'll face you. If they're not okay, they're going to turn away.
Yeah.
Take that as a cue.
Mm-hmm.
Get the hell out of their space. It definitely
Or
doesn't
create a
give you
bubble around themselves and move further away
right.
from you.
Yeah.
Don't be the close talker.
Exactly. Yeah. It definitely doesn't give you a right to you be the one to initiating that contact and the physical touch.
No, but there's always being
else.
respectful too,
Absolutely.
right? It's not just, just because you're dancing that's like free game to touch people.
Yeah. So I don't think it's so simple. I don't think it's straightforward. I don't think it's always easy, but there are clues that you can consider.
There are definitely clues to help you better understand when women are definitely attracted to you, whether they're hitting on you, things like that. I think it takes practice.
Yep.
I also think you have those men that just think they're God's gift and they think everyone's hitting on them, and they're probably wrong more often than not. But
there's guys out there who think that.
Yeah.
I say with dripping sarcasm.
Yes, I know you do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, my closing thought is this, and it's pretty funny. I will say, and look, I seem to think I understand women relatively well, but I'll still say I miss a lot of these cues.
Yep.
But, I remember going to visit my brother when I was younger in San Francisco with my other brother, and he and I just went for coffee one morning, and we were probably being hit on by men left, right, and center. We had an easier time figuring out what they were looking for than we ever did with women.
Right.
Right? So maybe men are a lot more straightforward than women.
And you know what? I know with me, because I don't want to assume anything.
Mm.
So I'm pretty, if there's interest on my part, I make it really clear, either be at the end of the night where, hey, I had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to go out again if you're interested.
Yeah.
So I kind of put it out there without making any assumptions. That way, if I am misreading signals or I am clueless, I put it out there, and I think that's important. And sometimes, depending on how the date's going and I'm feeling it, sometimes even in the middle of the date, I'll put it out there, and sometimes it's reciprocated. And
you're like a car salesman. It's like you just keep checking in with them to see if you can close them right then and there.
I don't do that too often, but there's
it's like it's feeling them out. It's like every once in a while, just throw out a statement to see if she's into it or not.
That, or I remember even with my ex on our first date, it felt magical, and kind of just throwing it out there, and it was reciprocated. I'll just leave it at that. But it was reciprocated, and so we didn't have to wait to the end of the evening to know that there was definitely mutual interest.
Okay, I'll go with I've never had to be the closer in that situation. I've always kind of known within the first 5 minutes whether or not I was in or not. And when I say in, I mean that, there was attraction there. Yep. The other person had interest, and, it was up to me to fuck that up. So I think this is an interesting conversation. I mean, we'll probably touch on it again later in a different way, attached to a different subject. But yeah. I think, we both realize we're still, in our 50s, relatively clueless to what women like or want. We just seem to think that we know something. But I think this was helpful for both of us, and I hope it was helpful for our audience too.
Absolutely.
And especially helpful for women to know that, men don't always pick up on your cues. And this may be why some of the more aggressive women seem to, do a little bit better with men too, because they kind of almost, attract other people like men would.
Yeah, so, make it a little bit more obvious.
Yeah.
And again, if there's things that we missed or things that maybe we got wrong or we interpreted that way, I'd love to hear from the women out there in terms of what their thoughts on it or what their cues are. And the flip side is,
please educate Al on women.
Exactly, because I can always use more education. And again, for the guys, just to help them be a bit more aware, but at the same time, don't go looking at a specific list and just be making assumptions with everything as well.
No, rule of 3, everyone. All right. Thank you for tuning in.
For tuning in,
not cluing in.
Yeah, although maybe if we've helped you out, maybe you are cluing in now.
Maybe we did clue in, Freudian slip.
This is Adam Dolgan. I'm Al Gord for the Kings of Chaos. Remember, you love what we're doing. Subscribe, follow us everywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, all the streaming services.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.